and I've definitely overcommitted to projects for the rest of the year, so we'll see how this all goes. Hi everyone, I'm Katrina Walser from Oliphant and I have a stash down vlog for you today. So I'm currently walking to my knitting group, which I literally haven't been to in about 2 years, so it'll be really nice to catch up with everybody, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to catch you up with my stash down as well. So I'm currently working on a present for my friend's baby shower and another present for my sister's 40th birthday / housewarming, and so it's literally her birthday today and I haven't started the project but I will get it done in time for her housewarming, which is in a couple of months. So I'll show you what I've been working on with those as I do them. So my sister's present is fairly colourful, and she had chosen a few colours from a Bendigo Woolen Mills shade card I had shown her, but I figured it'd be easier to choose the final colours in person. So I popped into Morris & Sons in the city and I picked out some colours from their giant rainbow wall based on what she had picked. This is pretty much what I ended up with, although I did end up subbing out the pink for a darker pink from BWM that I had in my stash. Now the present for my friend's baby shower is a fox toy, which I cast on the way to Morris & Sons. I've had my eye on some gorgeous patterns from little cotton rabbits for a really long time, so I finally bit the bullet and decided to make one. The reason it's taken me a while to get up the courage to make one of these is that they looked quite fiddly with lots of different pieces to knit and seam up, and there were some bits that used 2 or 3 colour intarsia like this one. I realised a few pieces in though that you can use stranded colour work instead of intarsia, as most of the different coloured sections were very short, and that saves you from having lots of balls attached to these tiny pieces. If you do decide to make one of these, I definitely recommend using the second version of the ear pattern that she gives, which is what I'm making here. It does involve using 3 different colours in one piece, but you only ever use 2 colours at once, and like I mentioned, I just used stranded colour work, so you can see here where I had some floats running across the wrong side. At the end of the day though, the knitting for this ended up being really straightforward. There were only 3 or 4 pieces that used more than one colour in them, and the rest were just in the main colour. Plus the patterns for the individual pieces were straightforward enough that I could just take them to board games and work on them a little bit in between my turns. For the first half of the month I was mostly working on the fox, so by the time I got to my knitting group I figured it'd be a good chance to start on the present for my sister. I'm using the Stella Quilt Blanket pattern by Laura Penrose to make some cushion covers, and it's all garter stitch, so it's a great project to work on while you're sitting and chatting to people. The pattern has instructions for how to adjust the size of the individual quilt block squares, which is great because when I originally used the pattern, the squares ended up being about 12 centimeters wide, but to cover the size of cushions my sister wants, they need to be 30 centimeters wide. Also, a quick tip if you ever use this pattern, for the very first triangle I find it really difficult to tell the difference between the right side and the wrong side. I found that if I put a marker in to show which side is which, it makes it way easier to tell where I'm up to in the pattern. After the first triangle, the right side and wrong side become really obvious, so you can stop using the marker. I had so much fun working on this in my knitting group that when I got home I sat down and finished the orange section that I was working on. Then I made the orange triangle for the second cushion cover pretty quickly after that. But then I had to put the project aside for a while. Even though I'd gotten the contrast colours from Morris & Sons, I didn't find a colour there that I wanted to use as the main colour, so I ordered that from BWM and had to wait until it was delivered to keep going. It was good that I was forced to go back to working on my fox because I did need to get a move on with that if I wanted to have it done in time for the baby shower. Like I said earlier, once you finish with the colour work, the pieces for the fox are pretty straightforward. The only bits that were a little bit tricky were the feet. So you do this odd thing where you bind off in the middle of one row and then purl across the next row, which leaves a big gap in the foot. I had to follow the pattern pretty carefully to get the stitch counts right, and just trusted that it would all work out when it came around to seaming it, because I didn't really know what I was doing at this point. So while I was finishing off the fox pieces, my order from BWM arrived, and this is probably a good time to tell you why I said I was overcommitted at the start of this video. So both my sister and my brother-in-law, as well as my dad, all have milestone birthdays this year, and I wanted to make them all something each, but they all chose really big projects. So my sister asked for the 2 big cushion covers, but then my brother-in-law and father both asked for cardigans. And while I'm pretty quick at making a cardigan normally, making them for a man is another proposition entirely, let alone for 2 people. So we'll see how it goes, and hopefully I don't get things to people way after their birthdays. So one thing that I spent a lot of time on earlier in the month that I didn't get a chance to film was figuring out how much yarn I would actually need to order for the cardigans. It took a lot of investigating and looking up patterns and yardages for men's sweaters, and also doing some swatching for my brother-in-law's cardigan too. So I ordered a bit extra just in case I got it wrong, but hopefully I'll have enough. So this straw colour is the neutral that my sister had picked out for her cushions, and that's 8-ply classic from BWM. And then for my father's cardigan, he chose this navy colour, and that's in their 4-ply classic yarn. Now that I had my neutral yarn, I was pretty excited to keep going with my cushion covers, so I went ahead and attached it to the first of the triangles straight away. It took me a while to figure out the yardages for my brother-in-law's cardigan, so I had to order that yarn separately, but this is also 8-ply luxury from BWM, plus an extra ball in their elixir base, which I mostly threw in to get the free shipping. Since I started my stash down, I've been very careful about logging all the yarn that comes in and out of my stash using Ravelry stash and project features, so I can track how much yarn I use up and still have to go. When I made my original Stella quilt blanket, I had a lot of yarn left over and I hadn't logged it in my stash yet. Given that I just got a bunch of new yarn, I went ahead and logged it all at once, which means I weighed it all and then took photos of each individual yarn. If you'd like to see what that looks like when it's done, I'll leave a link to my Ravelry stash in the description box below. And once that was done, I could get back to actually knitting. Hi, so I measured my cushion covers last night because I've done 2 squares now, so it's the width that it will be for the whole project. And they're way too big. And I'm really annoyed because I don't know how I did it. I was aiming for 60 centimeters wide and I've got 67, which is a really big difference. And in corner to corner projects, it should be pretty easy to get the width or the length correct. So I don't really know what I did, but at least I have a giant swatch now. So initially I was going to just keep going, and I actually ordered bigger cushion inserts last night than my sister asked for, because the bigger size is what will fit the cushion covers I've currently got. But then I realized that it's so much more knitting to do the bigger size that even if I frog what I've got and then make the smaller size, the total amount of time that I'll have spent on the project may even be less than if I keep going with the size that I've got. So hopefully it's a win. I wish I hadn't spent a bunch of extra time doing the wrong thing, but that's okay. We'll fix it and keep going. So instead of frogging my work entirely, I decided to just undo the end of what I'd made and knit straight from that. I already had the second orange triangle ready to go from earlier in the month, so I joined the neutral colour from the existing whip and kept going. In retrospect, I wish I'd frogged and washed the yarn. The BWM Classic didn't take well to being reworked, and parts of the new square were really uneven and lumpy. I managed to fix it a bit by tugging on some of the loose parts, but it's still a bit inconsistent. Also, I wouldn't recommend knitting at the beach with 2 active kids. I used to do it pretty successfully when my daughter was a baby, but I haven't tried it since then. And with a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, there was sand flying everywhere. Between the sand and the uneven texture, I'm definitely going to have to give this an extra careful wash and block when I'm done. Speaking of blocking, I finished all the fox pieces and gave them a block before seaming. I probably had a bit too much fun pinning them out, but I wanted to see roughly what they looked like in the right places, and it did look pretty hilarious. once all the pieces were dry, it was finally time to start seaming. Like I mentioned earlier, I was pretty nervous about having to seam the fox together, but I seriously can't say enough good things about this pattern. For most of the toys I've made so far, the pattern's been pretty vague about how to seam the pieces together, but this one's almost a hybrid of a knitting pattern and a sewing pattern. The instructions for seaming come with a lot of photos to show you how different pieces should look and how they fit together, how much stuffing you should put in different sections, and some parts even tell you exactly which stitches in the toy you should be pulling your darning needle in and out of. If you want to make one of these, the only change I would suggest is that the pattern tells you to knit each piece and then immediately seam it, but I did all of the knitting first and then did the seaming, and I think that was a good choice. It meant I could wash and block all the pieces together and not have a bunch of already stuffed body parts lying around that I had to keep track of. So the first things you sew up are the head and the ears, and that took me about 40 minutes. I didn't realize at the time, but I accidentally left my camera recording for all 40 of those minutes, and when I started making this video, I was planning to edit it pretty heavily, but I think the footage is actually pretty interesting. So this is what 40 minutes looks like, sped up into about 2 minutes worth of video. Hey, so this guy's looking really good. Isn't he cute? I'm down to the last arm and also have to do the tail. But one thing I wanted to tell you really quickly that I found interesting is that I've actually been doing a mix of both mattress stitch and crochet seams. And so I hate mattress stitch most of the time. So I fully expected I'd go in and start crochet seaming everything. But I've realized that the advantage of seaming mattress stitch is that you can actually see the right side of the material. So when you do mattress stitch, you hold the two pieces together with the right sides facing you. So you can actually see what you're doing on the right side. But then with crochet seaming, you hold the wrong sides together. And so it's a bit harder to see what the right side of the material looks like, which makes it a bit tricky for toys. So it's been very helpful using mattress stitch. But then there have been some situations, like with the arm just now, where, for example, here the edges are so curled in that doing mattress stitch on this is really tricky, because when you hold the right sides of the work together, then I can't really see the edges properly because they're sort of curling under. And so in this case, it's been really handy to know how to crochet seam instead. So I thought that was just an interesting observation. Definitely helps to know how to do both. And I have a tutorial for how to crochet seam, so I'll put a link to that up in the corner. I finished off the fox and it's so stinking cute. To be honest, it's way smaller than I expected it to be, but it's for a baby, so that's fine. Again, all credit to the pattern. If it wasn't for the instructions in there, I definitely wouldn't have managed to make it look quite so refined looking, and I especially appreciated the instructions for the facial features since I struggle a lot with faces for toys. After that, it was time to make the clothes, which were a jumper and a pair of shorts. The construction for the jumper was really strange. It's a raglan, but you knit the sleeves front and back separately bottom up, then join them at the underarms and work flat to the neck, then seam it all together. I was very tempted to just knit a regular raglan jumper, but given that the fox is knit in 10-ply yarn and the clothes are knit in 4-ply, I didn't want to mess with the instructions in case I got the sizing wrong. The jumper also has a slit in the neck so that you can get it over the fox's head, which you're meant to close up with a button, but I decided to make a tie out of some crochet chains instead because you're not meant to give babies clothes with buttons in them. If I ever do one of these again, I'll probably just knit a normal jumper and figure out how to add the neck slit to it. The pattern also includes instructions for how to duplicate stitch a star onto the front of the jumper, but I decided to just leave that out. So the yarn for the fox was Knit Pick Swish in 10-ply, with some scraps for the cream and black contrast colours. For the jumper I used a 4-ply sock yarn from Greenwood Fiberworks in this speckled purple colour, and I really wanted a navy for the shorts. I was digging around in my 4-ply scraps and I couldn't find a navy. Then I realised that the yarn that I had ordered from BWM for my dad's cardigan fit the bill exactly. Plus I could then use the shorts as a swatch for my dad's cardigan. After blocking and measuring the shorts, I do think I'm going to have to go down a needle size or two for dad's cardigan, so I'll have to swatch again later in the future. I am a bit worried that I'm going to be playing yarn chicken for the cardigan, but at the end of the day, I doubt that the 6 grams of yarn I used in the shorts is going to make a huge difference. And so here's the final product. I am so happy with this little guy. My goals around him were to make something that was hopefully almost heirloom quality, and I think I achieved them. Although I will say I think he looks a little bit more refined without his clothes on. Obviously they're fully removable, so it'll be up to my friend to decide whether she wants to keep them on or not. But let me know in the comments whether you think it looks better with or without the clothes, because I'm genuinely curious about what you all think. The last project I wanted to work on this month was my pinstriped top, which is a pattern I wrote for Knit Picks, and it's made from their yarn called Salvage. This has been a whip since last December, and all I had left to do was seam in the second sleeve and add the cuff, and the weather's getting warm enough to wear this now, so I wanted to finally finish it. If you've never seamed a set in sleeve before, the way you do it is that you join at the shoulders, and then you seam the armhole and sleeve together. In a set-in sleeve pattern, the armhole is always longer than the top of the sleeve, so you have to curve it around the sleeve a little bit. Getting the curves to line up properly can be a bit tricky, so to make it easier, I pinned the two pieces together using lots and lots of locking stitch markers before I start seaming. Okay, so I've sewn this seam in the shoulder in, which looks like this from the right side. So that's the shoulder seam there. And then what you do is you fold it in half and you seam all the way down the side, which connects the front and the back, and then from the underarm to the cuff. And then that'll be the end of all the seaming. And I know I just said that I sewed in the shoulder seam, but seams in garments are something that I always definitely do with a crochet hook instead of using mattress stitch. After all the seaming was done, the last thing to do was to add a cuff to the end of the sleeve, which you work by picking up stitches along the edge of the sleeve, then joining in the round and knitting around and around in garter stitch. It makes for really easy TV knitting, which was good because a couple of years ago my husband and I got really into a video game called Hades, and the second installment just came out. So I got to watch him play for a while as I finished off the cuff. I did end up watching him play a lot because my sister's cushion covers are also easy garter stitch TV knitting, and it was great for me because when I went to play the game myself, I had a better idea of how to do it. So September's over, and I wanted to give you a quick wrap up of everything that I got done in September and where I'm at with my stash. So the first thing I needed to show you is my pinstripe top because it's all done finally. I finished the cuff and I wove in all the ends, and I've been wearing it quite a bit since, and my mum saw it and decided that she wanted one immediately, which I'm going to take as a compliment because my mum can be quite picky, but I don't know when I'm going to get to it, honestly. It might have to be Mother's Day present for next May, but we'll get it done eventually. Other than that, I finished a pair of socks for my husband. So I didn't talk about these in this vlog, but if you go back an episode or two, then I talked about them a little bit there. And the last thing I finished was my fox toy. So I don't have it here. It's been gifted. The baby shower was a little while ago, but from everything I understand, they really like the toy. So I'm really glad to have finished that and gifted it. And I'm excited to see the baby with it when it comes. So the way I'm going to count my stash from here on out is that when I finish an FO, I will count all the yarn from that FO out of my stash at the end of that month. So in September, I used up 1,319 meters out of my stash, which is pretty good to be honest, but my stash total is now 40,619 meters. which is a little bit humbling because I know the last time I took a look at my stash numbers, I was celebrating being under 30,000 meters, and now we're over 40,000 meters. And I think just between adding all of the yarn from my Stella quilt blanket leftovers into my stash, plus all the yarn I had to buy for the presents, it's just blown it out significantly. But hopefully, because the presents are getting made very soon, a lot of that will be back out of my stash in the next couple of months. So fingers crossed we get the numbers down to a more manageable level soon. Okay, so going into October, the main whip that I have is my sister's cushion cover. So here it is. This is the front panel, and I'm really glad with how the colors have turned out because we did put a lot of thought into them in the end, and I'm glad all of that thought paid off. So I need to do the back panels for this and then seam it all up, and then I'll either move on to the second one or something else, and I'll just see how I'm going time-wise with the other presents I need to make. So if you'd like to follow along with how all of that goes, then I should have a new episode of the podcast up at the start of November. And so if you want to get a notification for when that episode comes out, then you can hit the subscribe button right here and then press the bell icon down below. And in the meantime, if you want to catch up with what I got up to get to this point, then there's a playlist of all my previous episodes right here. But until then, I've been Kat from Oliphant Cat. Happy knitting!